Amanda Decker, what's going on?
Not much, Jimmy. Just took my daughter to kindergarten. It's my last baby to go to school, so
Oh
a little
boy.
nervous, but I'm good.
Yeah, that's kind of a traumatic experience for parents when you send your baby off and now it's your last baby. No
Yep.
longer a baby anymore. Kind of a rite of passage into not being a baby anymore is going to school. So I bet that was hard on mama, wasn't it?
It has been, but she was ready. She was excited, so that helped.
Yes. Well, you're here today. You are a wife, mom, and nurse practitioner, according to your
Yep.
Twitter handle, Deckerless Carbs. I thought that was a creative name. Deckerless Carbs, or I guess Decker-less carbs, meaning
Yeah.
you eat less carbs in your diet now. And you're a nurse practitioner who was traditionally trained
Correct.
medical profession. And it was 3 years ago, kind of had your life change radically when you found this low carb diet thing. Talk about that transition. What got you to it? How did you overcome some of the preconceived notions you had about it from your medical training? Go.
Yeah. So I was trained at Vanderbilt here in Tennessee. It was a very traditional nurse practitioner school, great school, but that's where my training came from. I came to low carb like most providers do, almost from a personal side of things. So I was dealing with some weight issues and some other issues, and just started thinking about, what happens when I'm successful at losing weight? What's going on? And said, it's when I cut the bread out. It's when I cut the potatoes out. It's when I cut the sugar out. So let me just play around with this. And I didn't technically go low carb. I hadn't read on it. I hadn't had any training on it. And I just said, I'm going to eat just plain vegetables and meats and just get rid of the processed junk from my diet. And I was very successful for the first time in my life at actually maintaining a weight that I was happy with and feeling good about myself. And then about 3 years ago, just kind of got to a point in my practice where it was like, none of my patients are getting better. Why are none of my patients getting better? I went into this, I've been a nurse practitioner for 15 years. It's like I went into this to make people better, to help them, to give them a better life. And that's not happening. So why is it not happening? And then it was like this little light bulb went off in my head. It's like, well, it's what they eat. It's like, it happened in my life. Why can't this happen for my patients' lives? And so that's when my practice just totally changed and started speaking to every patient I could, or that would listen to me without rolling their eyes and saying, all right, doc, it's time for me to leave. Just saying, let's address some of the stuff that you're putting in yourself because it affects everything else out there.
It's this disconnect between patients who get it and the medical profession that has been trained very specifically not in nutrition. And to me, that is the biggest dereliction of duty that I think the medical profession has is why aren't you teaching medical doctors, nurses, everybody in the system abundantly about the role of food in your health? I mean, is it as if this or is food like Wizard of Oz, hiding behind a curtain? Like we know he's there, we know it matters, but we really don't know what to do about it. It's just odd to me.
Yeah. And I've thought about that a little bit lately, and I think it's our society has become so sick. We are so sick that we just try to throw anything and everything at most people to get them better. We've morphed into moving away from traditional medicine, which I consider to be the diet and our lifestyle, into let's just put a pill on it and send them out the door and make them better for a minute. We've gone to Band-Aid medicine, basically, what happened, but because there's so much illness and sickness in our society, trying to cram all that into medical education is difficult, and you're trying to teach them a little bit about everything. So it's like,
So I wonder if it could be, it's worth extra year possibly, or an extra half year of education. I know you don't want to hear that, all you medical professionals, but like if you put nutrition in, you have to take something out. So what in your current training would you take out in order for you to put nutrition in? I think a solid kind of 6 months worth of education in nutrition, you could be pretty darn adept at like all the intricacies of it. And again, that's assuming no special interests are involved. I know the vegans are very crafty right now, putting into medical schools this little manual. I got a copy of it. And it's just vegan propaganda that they're giving to every single medical school student now. This is the kind of thing that you worry about when you do start talking nutrition, but just getting them to look at nutrition to begin with is a major accomplishment.
Yeah, it would be a major accomplishment. I mean, even if there was just one semester class, a full class in nutrition, it would start, because I do think doctors probably 50, 60 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, they were it for that, for that patient. And I feel like that's something we've totally moved away from in medicine. And they were telling them about nutrition and telling them how to treat things that way. We're not that. We're just a disease at this point.
Healthcare has mainly become industrial. In other words, this is the way you handle certain situations, the standard of care, which a lot of patients, they don't understand standard of care. And I shared very openly on Twitter recently where you were getting deemed in your file because you weren't having enough of your patients go on statin therapy, even though their numbers showed that that would be the protocol that would be needed. Can you talk a little bit of that story?
Yeah, so just about like as far as the metrics and how we're graded and that type of thing. Is that where you want to go with this? Yeah, so reimbursement is based predominantly off of Medicare, and Medicare is a government-run entity. They set these metrics or guidelines that we're supposed to follow. So when it comes to cholesterol, if a patient has diabetes, heart disease, you're for sure supposed to put them on a statin. That's just a go-to. If their LDL is over a certain amount, you're supposed to put them on a statin just across the board. And then each provider's looked at and given kind of how well do you perform on that? What's your percentage on that? And then you take that percentage and you're assigned a grade. So I get a grade on how well I perform on each of these metrics. And statin's just one of those. I'm also graded on A1Cs. I'm graded on how often do my patients pick up their prescriptions that I prescribe them, their blood pressure, all kinds of things that we're assigned these grades on. But what's eventually going to happen is these grades are going to be tied to our reimbursement. So even if I spend 45 minutes with a patient educating them on diet and lifestyle and ways to improve their health, not just their LDL, but LDL and everything else, my grade's going to be lower because I still don't have them on a statin medication, or they're not filling their statin medication regularly because they're having side effects or things of that nature. And it puts a lot of pressure on providers to prescribe things when that may not be the best option.
And that's another thing patients don't understand. Patients go to see their doctor and their nurse practitioner, and they just assume these are the great purveyors of all knowledge, and you're incredibly knowledgeable. But they're taking away your ability to practice, your ability to make judgment calls. And I don't think that that's being clearly communicated to a patient that, yes, you have an ability to make a judgment call, but your hands are being tied, almost forcing you into doing what the system wants you to do rather than what you think is most prudent.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen then. And what has slowly happened in medicine over time is, say we do make our judgment calls and we don't get the best grade because we're not prescribing the most medications in a certain way. And we have to almost increase our volume of patients just to kind of keep up monetarily and keep our doors open, things of that nature. And then we spend less time with our patients, and then our patients get sicker because they're not getting the care they need and the information from us. So it's just kind of a vicious cycle.
And this is endemic of the problem with mainstream medicine. And I know you're frustrated with it just as much as anybody. Being in the midst of it, you're frustrated with it. It's why people are turning to functional medicine and natural medicine. And the saddest part, Amanda, they're doing it on their own sometimes too. And like when you leave a patient on devices, especially one with a condition like type 2 diabetes, where they're on insulin, they're on metformin, they're on all these prescription medications to help manage the disease, they go low carb, they need help coming off of medications, and it's going to happen fast.
Yeah, they do. And I think different parts of the country are different with that. In where I live in a very rural area, and we don't all have internet access everywhere. We don't all have devices. People are kind of left to just make up their own minds about things, or guess. They're guessing,
Right.
guessing at what's best for their health. And so when it comes to low carb, and especially when it comes to functional medicine, if they don't have a doctor to talk to, which they really don't in this area, they're getting bits and pieces off the internet. And you know as well as I do, the low carb world has exploded on the internet, and not all the advice is good advice. It's not all good advice. And so, plus, when it circle back around to insurance side of things, I live in a poor area. About 30 to 40% of the kids in my county are on free and reduced lunch. In Tennessee, up to 49% of kids are on free and reduced lunch. So we've got a poor community who doesn't have the funds without their insurance, to go see a functional medicine doctor or someone who is trained in that way. So they're reliant on their insurance, is what I'm getting. They're reliant on their insurance to get their care, but they can't get the care they need to move in the right direction. And so they do get the standard of care, which is, here's your metformin, here's your statin, here's your lisinopril to protect your kidneys from your diabetes, as opposed to, let's fix what you're doing and let me work with you, and let's come off of some of these medicines and make sure that you're guided through this transition to make sure you don't become deficient in your electrolytes. So they're just kind of stuck. And when they do attempt, they feel so bad, they go right back to what they were doing before.
Well, and when people are lower income and more kind of distraught in finances, they tend to default to things that they've heard. So, mama had diabetes, grandma had diabetes, everybody in the family has diabetes. So, Nurse Decker, I guess I'm going to get diabetes. So there's kind of this inevitability to convince themselves, well, I'm going to get it anyway, so why should I change my diet?
Yeah, and that's one of my struggles every day. I think I have this conversation with patients every single day. They're just saying it's just what's going to happen. And I tell them, that's not what has to happen. I have diabetes in my family. I have multiple members in my family with diabetes, but that doesn't have to be me. It's like your genetics kind of load that gun, and we're in the South, so we can talk about guns. So we load that gun, but what you do with that, you can pull the trigger or not pull the trigger. And so, but they look at me like I'm lying, because it's just generation from generation taught that this is your lot in life. This is just what it's going to happen. You're going to be overweight. You're going to be diabetic. This is what's going to happen.
And never mind the fact that you share another thing besides genes. You share culture, you share similar eating habits.
Yeah.
That couldn't have anything to do with it.
No. I mean, you would think, being in an agricultural part, we would be bigger on vegetables and fresh meats and things like that. But no, every meat or every meal is meat and bread. And it's not, your meal is not judged on health, whether or not it is truly healthy. It's the quantity and the amount that you eat is whether or not it's a healthy meal or not a healthy meal. And it's not a meal unless you have, chicken, mac and cheese, mashed potatoes, and a side of a roll. That's a meal. And that's common every day.
Yeah, I have a family history of heart disease. In my family, my dad had a heart attack at 48, another one at 50, and quintuple heart bypass at 54. My brother Kevin had 3 heart attacks at 32 and then died of heart disease at 41. My aunt, Mary Jane, just last year had a heart attack. Both of my grandfathers had heart issues. It don't look good for Jimmy's family history. But I tell people often, I don't let that be a death sentence for me. It doesn't, I can't put in the effort to sleep better, move better, eat better, all the things, get sunshine, get fresh air, all the things that we know to do. That epigenetic expression of those genes is so powerful. Like, how do you communicate that to them to say, hey, look, and give hope to people that feel, quite frankly, hopeless?
Yeah. That hope part is, man, that can change everything. As far as when I'm working with a patient, just telling them, this does not have to be you. This doesn't have to be your lot in life. So let's work on some changes that can move you out of that. And at first they look at me like, you have to be lying. You have to be lying. Fat is going to kill me if I have heart disease in my family. Why are you doing this? So, it's my first consult with a patient is about 45 minutes to an hour long, so that I can go back and try to reverse some of that they've been taught, or not even taught, just what they heard and assumed to be true. and that brings up a whole nother part to the South is we are health illiterate. We are in health disparity as far as our education for that health for our general population. But we're not, school has nutrition, but the school nutrition is built on guidelines that don't necessarily fit most of us. So a lot of my patients just feel stuck and trapped and trying to move them past that. And I tell them, give me a month, do what I say for a month, and then tell me if you still feel trapped and tell me what you're feeling after that. And 9 times out of 10, they come back and they're feeling better. But then how do you keep them from falling back off that track? Because the culture is just so strong. I had a recent post on Twitter where I just had a day where I felt like a failure. Like, this is a failure day because I had one person who went low carb and in 3 months or 4 months lost 30 pounds. Another one had lost 100 pounds over the course of a year. And they both got set off track. One went out with his farmer buddies and let biscuits take over. And it was just from there. And the other one was doing so well and corn came into season. And so it's like sweet corn took over from there. And then it's just trickling right back into the habits they were, even though they felt amazing, months before.
Yeah, I grew up as a teenager in rural Tennessee as well, Bolivar, Tennessee, just south of Jackson. If you sneeze, you miss Bolivar. That's how small the town is. It's a little bigger than that. But, and yeah, the culture. I remember growing up, Amanda, there. And yeah, when you get around people, they just start talking. And when they talk, and they just talk whatever's on their mind. And, if you drink water, it's good for your skin, and that kind of thing. And so colloquialism that people learn about health. Oh, I heard that if you take vitamin C, it might help with the corona, that kind of thing, that it's not always good information because most of the time it's somebody saw a headline and boom, they believe it.
Yes. It's that I talk about health disparities, but I'm not even sure that we're educating our kids to read and write the way that we need to educate our kids to read and write anymore. And then to be able to have the logical thing, go back and read through something,
right,
get apart to know if it's truth or not truth. And they're used to just taking headlines and accepting that as, all right, it has to be true. It was the headline.
Yeah, I do Jimmy Rant's show right here in this studio, and I did one recently that talked about the psychology of that. Most people think they hear information and then they analyze, assimilate what they believe about it, and then they regurgitate that. That's not what happens. People see something. Psychologists all confirm this. When people see something, the first thing is belief.
Yeah.
You believe, then you might go back and vet it out later. But most people, you see something, believe it. This is why media is so powerful. It's why when they do a flawed study, an epidemiological type of study that red meat causes cancer, it's going to kill you, that drives fear, and fear drives them to your office, and there's no way I'm going to eat more meat. And I'm not doing that. That's going to kill me.
Yeah, it does. They're just so freaked out by the idea that meat is going to kill them, but it's not the meat, it's the other stuff, and trying to go against that. And even if I show them the research studies, they're going to look at it and be blinders on type thing.
That's one reason I started writing books at a consumer level, was I wanted to make things understandable without being too gobbledygooky to people. And what's funny about that book I just showed you, Keto Clarity and Cholesterol Clarity, the same thing. People say both. It is this most simplistic, it's too easy, too dumbed down, it's the hardest thing I've ever read in my life. And I'm going, okay, I guess I struck a good balance then if I get that dichotomy of responses. But I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like, what is it going to take to penetrate this person? And you've got to individualize it. You know who you're talking to. You know if they have the intellectual capacity to understand beta hydroxybutyrate and large fluffy LDL versus small dense LDL. You can explain that to certain people. Others will go, large what? Boy, what?
Well, I think what I have found to be the best analogy here is plumbing. If you relate it all back to plumbing, it just somehow clicks, or even a hose pipe, it just somehow clicks. So it's like, I use the hose pipe analogy all the time. I'm like, well, high blood pressure, normal blood pressure, your water's flowing through the hose pipe and it's not putting a lot of pressure on the walls of that. But you turn up the nozzle and all of a sudden you got a whole lot of pressure on that hose pipe. And then when I'm talking to him about diabetes, it's like, all right, we got to think about that hose pipe again for diabetes. Think about if you had shards of glass sticking on the edges of that hose pipe and then your blood's trying to go through, or you've got shards of glass going through that blood or through that water, that hose pipe, what's it going to do to the inside there? Okay, well, that's what's happening inside your blood vessels is you've got shards of sugar glass running through there that's going to muck it up, and then you're going to build plaque because your body's having to respond to all those sores that you just created with all the sugar. And then we kind of go back into, well, what makes our sugar high? You got three things. You got protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Fat doesn't necessarily raise sugar. Protein helps to stabilize sugar. So there's only one left that can mess with that. Let's just connect some dots. If sugar mucks us up and carbs cause sugar, something in the room's not right.
But you can't take away my energy, Nurse Dicker. I gotta have energy. I don't eat carbs. That's the only thing. Oatmeal in the morning with a banana and orange juice. I gotta have that, or I won't have energy.
It is the sweet tea around here, man.
Sweet tea. Oh yeah, you gotta get the sweet tea in the South. See, I can make fun of Southerners because I am one. So.
Yeah, well, I do think CGMs or wearing the Freestyle Libre, things like that opens up a lot of eyes, but there again, insurance regulates the cost on that. And my patients don't have $120, $160 to go buy it themselves to figure it out. And I wish that would become a standard of care. I wish it was required that everyone that had diabetes had to wear 30 days of a CGM just to see what happens.
Or better than diabetes, everybody with insulin resistance. Because if you have insulin resistance, you got a propensity towards going to type 2 diabetes. So why don't we ward those people off from going there? It's not inevitable, like we've kind of made a theme song here. Yeah. None of this is inevitable. Obesity is not inevitable just because it runs in your family. Yeah. Diabetes is not inevitable. Heart disease is not inevitable. I want to do an analogy with heart disease that I think resonates with people, and you probably have used this one as well. People talk about eating fat, clogging arteries. And so, well, look in there, you can see the cholesterol. And I'm like, okay, analogy time. Let's imagine your neighbor's house is on fire. Mm-hmm. If your neighbor's house is on fire, what's going to happen? If you've got a good neighborhood, you got a firefighter that comes and puts out the fire. And so they come and put out the fire. Do we blame the firefighter for the fire? Of course not. The firefighter's there to help heal the fire. Well, guess what? Fire in your body, in your arteries, is inflammation. The firefighter is the cholesterol. So just because it's at the scene of the fire does not mean it caused it. It's actually there to save your life. So when you have clogged arteries, it means you kept dealing with a fire. You kept putting a fire. You kept lighting it all over the place and pouring gasoline on it with all the carbs and seed oils you ate.
Yeah.
The result is you get coronary artery disease.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they're given the advice to even continue on a low-fat diet after that. And it's just the low-fat diet in the South is we have boneless, skinless chicken breasts with our biscuits. I mean, that's
margarine. My dad, he had his heart attack at 48, and he got big, long sheet sent home with him. And I remember I was like reading through that and going, Dad, you're not really doing this right. Like, this is a joke, right? And the quintuple heart bypass after that one too. I'm like, don't eat like this. You will slowly deteriorate. And guess what? He's 70 years old and he's slowly deteriorating. And it didn't need to be that. But that generation is so trusting. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm not as trusting, although many in my generation are still trusting. It's the millennials that are going, yeah, screw that. I'm not doing any. And Gen Zers, they're off the rail. They're all on TikTok. So you've got kind of this dichotomy of this older guard. And maybe that's what's going to bring about change. People like yourself and the younger generation will now kind of lead the charge once the old guard starts to die off.
Yeah. And, going back to the whole medical education, I think that's another reason why we're stuck is the people who are teaching in our medical schools are much older generation and clinging to the fat is bad and that type of thing. So I honestly think some of them are going to have to die off for us to even make an impact in our medical education to move in the other direction.
Well, and the amazing part about it, Amanda, it's not like we haven't had any science in the past 50 years. have major science. Nina Teicholz did an incredible job in The Big Fat Surprise. Gary Taubes in Good Calories, Bad Calories. I mean, we have some seminal work that really outline. I know Gary in his book alone, what was it, 60? No, it was 150 of pages of that book was just the citations to his work that he was talking about. And I'm going, oh my gosh, like if you're looking for the science, it's in there. Nina did the same thing, but it's out there and it's constantly being looked at, not just for ketogenic purposes. Yes, a lot of that, but really just the fact that fat is necessary and communicating essential fatty acids. We have essential amino acids. There is no essential carbohydrate acids.
Carbohydrate. No, we could live completely fine without them or on minimal of them. They're survival foods. They're not essential foods for sure. For sure.
And to the patient population that you look at, they're probably not at all interested in science. They don't give a rip about that. Just tell me what to eat, nurse Dicker. And so how do you help them with their strained economic ability? And this is what the criticism kind of a low-carb ketogenic diet has, is how do you eat on the cheap? And I'm thinking, how do you not? Like, you don't eat as frequently, so less often. That saves you money. Then the foods that you do eat, if they're real food, nutrient-dense foods, you stay satiated, so you feel good. It's just, to me, that's kind of a non-starter. It's almost like, oh, I can't do it. It's too expensive. And it's like a hand put up. And I'm like, all right, let's do a cost analysis. I used to drink 16 cans of Coca-Cola a day. I used to eat whole boxes of like Little Debbie snack cakes. I had fast food and junk food galore all the time. And it was all cheap food.
Yeah.
So cheap in the individual, but cumulative, it was massive. And I did a cost analysis, Amanda, one time between that, what I used to buy all the time, and what I buy now.
Yeah.
It's day. I mean, it's probably a third of what I used to spend, and it's far better quality food.
Yeah. So I think where people get hung up is they're used to buying these quick convenience foods that are cheap foods, and they try to transition that same quick convenience food over into a low carbohydrate diet. And there's no cheap convenient food in the that is low carbohydrate. It's all more expensive to buy low carb bars and cookies, things like that. And so, where I start with is eat whole foods, eat real foods. It's going to be cheaper if you're eating real foods, not buying things that had to be processed in a package. And then nobody is saying that you have to start by eating, grass-fed meat, top shelf meat, all that type stuff. Get what you can afford and start there,
Yeah.
But when you do squash the hunger, when in the beginning, they may eat more meat and it may be more expensive that first couple of weeks while they're squashing the hunger. But then after hunger is down, you are eating less, but get what you can afford. Patients tell me all the time, I can't afford that meat. And it's like, well, I was just at Kroger and they have boneless chicken thighs with the skin still on it that's got great fat there. They're pretty cheap. I bought them. They were good. And, I buy my meat in a bulk. Actually, I'm buying my meat from my dad. My parents they raise Black Angus cattle.
Nice.
So, yeah, I'm getting a half a cow from them this year because my meat consumption's went up. But, we live in that area where if you do kind of save up over the year and go buy a cow from a farmer, it is cheaper over the course of the year. But you don't have to buy the packaged stuff. And that's where they get hung up on. It's just buying these keto foods that are not even keto half the time. And they're spending their money in the wrong place. Spend your money where it counts.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the best things I did, Amanda, a few years back was I invested in backyard chickens. I got 17 of them bad boys back there. Yesterday, they gave me a dozen eggs. And that's a very cheap way. You don't have to have chickens, but I highly encourage it. It's really cool to know where your food comes from, and all that grass and everything. But eggs is such a cheap source of fat and protein. And literally, if God created a more perfect, I don't know what it is besides eggs, because it's the exact ratio of fat and protein, no carbohydrate. It's literally nature's food.
For sure. And then eggs is kind of one of my number one go-tos, but then even when you're cooking the meat, save your fats. save the fat drippings from the meat and reuse them, because that's just more calories and more energy for you later that you're not having to add in like olive oils and coconut oils, because everybody thinks that you have to go buy these expensive oils when you take over to keto. But no, reuse what you got.
And that's a psychological thing too. Same with bacon, by the way. Keep the bacon.
Yeah, for sure.
Mayo is unbelievable if you've never made it before, but people, they have such this notion, it's just so hardwired in our heads, fat is bad. So when people hear about a low carb diet, they think, okay, low carb is good, so low carb, low fat must be better. And undoing that, getting people to stop fearing fat, I still think that's the last hurdle we need before low carb becomes generally accepted.
For sure, because it's like, if you're not eating fat and you're not eating carbs, what are you eating?
You're starving.
And breast, and that's about it.
You're starving.
Yeah, you are. You're starving. It's like, you can't do that. You got to pick a team, and we got to move one way or the other. Yeah,
so speaking of chicken, I was wearing a CGM recently, the Freestyle Libre, and I thought, let's have a little fun with this. I had done a fasting protocol, and I wanted to see what happened. When that was over, you have 2 weeks with that thing. So in the second week, I said, all right, what are we going to do? Pound of chicken breast. I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
Because people talk about like gluconeogenesis from too much protein, and I talked about it in my books and things like that. Okay, let's see what happens. And so I consume a pound of chicken breast, like a rotisserie kind of chicken breast, and I test. What's that?
No sauces or anything on it. Just
No. Plain. It was disgusting. It was so dry. It was nasty. But science. But I ate it straight up, and that was it. Like, yeah, no added fat, no nothing. It was just the chicken. So I tested at baseline, and it was 82. And then I tested at 15 minutes postprandial. I was going to go 2 hours. I had to go a little longer, and I'll explain in a second. But 15 minutes, it had gone up to 85. Okay. 30 minutes, it was up to 87. All right, that's still cool. 45 minutes, I have this rush of hunger like I haven't felt before. Starving. I started getting dizzy. I was over here on this couch, and I was just like, all I could do to just stay awake. I was getting dizzy.
You're going low.
And so I tested my blood sugar. What'd you say?
You were going low.
Hypo. Yeah. So I tested my blood sugar, and it was down in the low 70s by that point. So it had dropped from 87 to low 70s. Pretty good drop. And then it just kind of hovered there till it got to a low of like 68 or 9. And that was at 2 hours postprandial. And I was like, I need to end this. But I'm starving. I'm in full-on hypoglycemia. I felt it before. I know what it feels like. I said, I got to go until it's close to baseline. So it 2 hours, 15 minutes, slowly back up 71. And then at 2 hours and a half, it finally got to like 78. And I'm like, close enough to baseline. I came in here, and I put some grass-fed butter in a pan, and I ate 8 eggs from my backyard chickens, and within 10 minutes I felt better. So the moral of that story was, don't eat protein by itself. This whole low fat, low carb thing, it ain't going to end well.
No, it is not going to end well. It's not going to end well at all. And that's another reason I think it is possible to do a vegetarian keto, but I think they have to be very specific, because a lot of vegetarian keto people rely more on the low carb veggies, and they're not getting enough fat in their diet too, and so they end up not being low carb at all because the ratios are all mixed. But I'm feeling you too about the chicken. Got to have fat in there, and that's the only way you're going to feel full and satiated. I tell my patients, both of those, your fat and your protein, they're just going to stabilize everything out for you. And we like a stable thing. We don't like to be going up and down like this. And I think they have to try it and see. That's all they can do. Well,
and just getting patients to understand that testing blood sugar is not just something for a type 2 or a type 1 diabetic. It's for everybody. And I'm hoping, I've been hammering this one hard for many years, Amanda, but I'm hoping that people realize knowing your blood sugar level is probably more important than knowing your total cholesterol level. Like, total cholesterol doesn't really tell you much about your health. Triglycerides, yes. Inflammation markers, SCRP, homocysteine, yeah, those are critical. But blood sugar and fasting insulin, all of these things that doctors don't run anymore. Like, I don't know what it's like in your clinic, but I went to get a physical checkup at my doctor. He's just around the corner over here about 2-3 years ago. And I went in and I noticed he stopped running fasting insulin. I'm like, where's the insulin test? I need to test insulin. And so they said, oh, the doctor said not to run it. I'm like, well, can you ask him? And so he comes back, nope, can't run it. I'm like, is it an insurance thing? I'll pay out of pocket. I'll slap down the 50-60 bucks for it. I want to know what that number is. They still refused, Amanda. I had to fire him because I can go online at places like Any Lab Test Now or Private MD Labs. There's all kind of places online. You can run your own tests. But why should a patient have to go through all that rigmarole just to get the things that they need?
Yeah, no, I totally disagree with that. And I encourage all my providers that I come into contact with to be checking insulin levels. I like to see it fasting and non-fasting. I like to kind of see the full range of the spectrum there. And that's part of my initial workup with all of my weight loss clients that I see doing the fasting insulin level. Most of them, I look back in their charts and they have never had it drawn. And then what it does is it gives me the power to come back and say, all right, you said you're not diabetic, you don't have problems with it, you just have to eat like a diabetic. So your insulin level's at like 20 something, and your blood sugar's okay, but your body's having to work so hard to get that sugar down there. That tells me you're going to be diabetic sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So we can either do something about it now, or we can become diabetic. And giving the patient that information is so important. I don't know why doctors don't run it. I've not had an insurance claim turned down for insulin, as long as I am kind of saying that they've got some metabolic dysfunction. And guess what? If we have a waist circumference that needs metabolic disorder, we got metabolic disorder. So it's like it's there, and insurance will pay for it. And I don't know why doctors won't run it, other than the fact that they don't want to try to interpret it and have that conversation, or they don't have time to have that conversation afterwards.
There it is. That's where I was going to go with this, because a lot of times, and I understand a lot of health markers because of what I've gotten to do for a living for 15 years. And sometimes I would go in to talk to him, especially like cholesterol numbers and fractions of the LDL and everything. And he would look at the NMR lipo profile and, okay. I'm like, no, don't you want to look? I've got really good pattern A. And he's like, what's that mean? Like, when I know more about interpreting data than my doctor does, there's something wrong with that. And I'm not faulting him. He hasn't been educated.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, is patients, again, are very trusting that the doctor stays up to date on all these things. Now, I've been to many medical conferences with MDs and nurses and everybody that attend, and I hear what they get taught. And a lot of it is pharmaceutical taught as well. So they're not going to want you to know, go run a CT heart scan to see if there's actually atherosclerotic plaque in the arteries. No, they've got a drug that will deal with that. So let's sell you the drug. Let's not kind of tell you about CT heart scans. It's frustrating as a patient.
I see that creeping in on the obesity side of it. Like, I'm a member of the Obesity Medicine Association and got a certification through them. And when I first started my certification process, a lot of it was about health coaching. It was nutrition. It was about lifestyle change talk and trying to get your patient motivated. But by the time I finished my certification with them and I went to a conference, it was like 85% about the obesity drugs that are out there. And while I am not using obesity drugs, I think they have a place that can't be the primary focus of our education for ourselves or our education for our patients, because it just changes the dynamic of the patient-provider relationship. Because then it's all about, well, let me give you this and I'll see you in a couple months, instead of what can we do in your life, and let's educate you about what's coming through your metrics, your blood values. I am not against pharmaceuticals. It definitely that relationship and not for the better.
Yeah. By the way, when were you with the Obesity Society and all that?
So I am still an active member of the Obesity Medicine Association. When I say active, I pay my dues, but that's about it. I finished my certification with them. I guess it was about a year and a half ago that I finished.
Oh, okay. So recently, okay, because they used to be called the American Society of Bariatric Physicians, and they had a kind of a cultural issue with that. People thought it was all weight loss surgery, and no, we're about obesity medicine, and that encompasses bariatric surgery, but all the other things as well. But when they were the American Society of Bariatric Physicians, that's when I was attending their conferences from 2007, 7, all the way till about 2015. I went, and fascinating being a layperson, like around all these medical people and hearing what they're being taught. And during that time, they had an entire track of just like low carb nutrition being taught, and suddenly went away. They stopped teaching it. And I'm thinking, okay, is it no longer viable, or what happened? Did leadership come into it? See, this is the thing that, again, patients don't understand. The people teaching for doctors also have biases that they are passing on to the medical people that are attending these conferences. Never mind the pharmaceutical influence, which it tripped me out. All the breakfasts that were sponsored by a pharmaceutical, and it was bagels and muffins and everything crappy garbage you could think of. And I'm like, here is a weight loss conference, bariatric obesity medicine conference, and you're selling the very antithesis of something that would be healthy.
Yeah. Now, I will say the conference I went to, they did at least serve salads, and they had eggs and bacon for breakfast. So there was still the high carb option. It was
Right.
kind of, it was spread. You could go either way, whether you were a calorie counter or a carb counter. But it was very disheartening to see that the bulk of the information we were given was always pointing back to the pharmaceuticals and not was so much on the lifestyle change. And I do have to say, like I said, I use pharmaceutical products for weight loss.
Right.
Especially I find that for certain patients, that gives them the motivation to kind of step in and add to that lifestyle thing.
Right.
And I've got a great group of reps that don't push it on me. They're like, hey, we're here. Tell me what you need, but they're not in my face. They're not pushing it. They're not talking about my cells or anything like that. But the money, you follow the money in that organization specifically. And it does affect our patient relationship. I think what we have to get back to in the obesity world is that complete picture. We have to look at the patient as a whole, meet them where they are. We have to address, their family situations, their lifestyle, their nutrition, and if they need pharmaceuticals, okay.
Yeah, medicine has become a shotgun approach. Let's just blast everybody with the same treatment. We need more. Okay, yeah, that one right there. Sorry with the gun analogy, but
it's a quick intervention. It's a quick intervention that you can get the patient in and out of the room and get the next patient in, and feel like you still, put your pat on the back because you did quality of care and met standards of care, but it's not that anymore.
It has to be so hard in 2020 with full access to the internet, although in your area it's a little less access. So I guess that's a blessing for you in your practice. But there are people that think they're online warriors and they have all the information, and they come all smug with that information. Well, I read a study that said, they read a headline, read a study, and then you're just like, because they're getting mixed messages. They're hearing one thing one day about eggs, and then hearing another thing that's as bad as smoking 7 cigarettes, eating 1 egg, and it just kind of boggles people's brains. How do you kind of cut through the muckety muck of all that and say, here's the deal?
Yeah, so for me, it's about establishing that trust relationship, because the patient ultimately has to choose who they're going to trust. Are they going to trust what they're reading? Are they going to trust what they're hearing? Are they going to trust me? For me, that is taking my time, spending time with patients, explaining to them, also explaining, this is what I do in my personal life. And if I'm going to do something in my life, do you think I'm going to do something that's going to cause harm for me? This is something that I recommend for my friends and family. I've converted several friends and family into this. Do you think I'm going to do something to them that I truly think is going to cause harm? And, I think it just comes down to that trust, and then trying and seeing. And if that trust relationship is not there, they're not going to try it. And then I try to point out, all right, let's look at that study or what you read online, and let's read the details, and let's see where the source is coming from. Where did the money come from that funded that study? And let's look at the fine line. Was it an actual risk reduction or relative risk reduction? Which one was it? And then sometimes I get blind eyes when I bring up those words like, Amanda, that's statistics words or something. I can't do that. That's math. And it's okay.
Well, with like statins, for example, it's easy to kind of compare, you know what, how many people do you think needs to take this drug in order for one person to get a benefit? And a lot of people would say, oh, well, it's probably like 2 people take it, 1 person gets, takes it, it's going to give them benefit. And then you drop a bomb on me, baby, and you say 100 to 1. And they're like, wait, so 99 people don't get a benefit that 1 person does? And it's not the cholesterol lowering effect. It's probably the inflammation lowering or some other modulating things to your hormones that happens that gives you the improvement. Yeah. So they sold us on a lie. And again, those Lipitor commercials were very salacious when they first came out. Oh, an 80% reduction. And then it's not the absolute change, it's the relative change. Mm-hmm. And 80%, oh my gosh. You realize that was from like 3% to 1%, right? Not a big deal.
Not a big deal at all. And now we're seeing the same thing happen with the newer class of drugs that are coming out. The like Repathin, things like that, the PCSK9s. That I actually asked my rep the first time that she came to see me. I was like, so is this a relative risk reduction or an actual risk reduction? She's like, well, it's the relative risk. I was like, well, I'm going to need to know that other number. Well, I don't know that number. I was like, well, you should. You should know that number. And so she came back and gave it to me. And she's like, does that make a difference? I was like, it makes a difference for me not prescribing it because you're having this hugely expensive drug that is only going to help a couple of people. Now, if the person has already had heart disease, already had heart attacks, we might have a different conversation there. Right. But, just for reducing risk, no, that's not your biggest thing for your buck. I'm sorry. And then I'm going to spend patients $800, $900, $1,000 a month for something that might reduce their risk by 1 or 2%. Okay.
Well, and what trips me up is for many years, they've been pushing statin. Well, I just saw a commercial recently. I had to take a video of it. I want to show you of a new drug. Are you still at risk for heart attack or stroke? Even if you're on statin, statins may lower some risks, but may not be enough. That's why science delivered placebo for people who have persistent cardiac. So I know you know that drug. You've probably been pitched it by your rep, but it's like statins aren't enough anymore. And I'm like, okay, all those years you said people need to be on a statin. We don't have a statin deficiency. Statin doing? What's this newfangled drug? What is it doing that diet and lifestyle can't fix?
Yeah, man, nothing. It's doing nothing. And it's just, I think it's very sad that I wish a pharmaceutical company could bottle diet and exercise, right? Because then wouldn't it be the best? We would have the money behind the education that we need. We would have, the guidelines that would say that we could use it. Well, actually, don't the guidelines still say diet and exercise are first line everywhere? We just kind of ignore it because it's too hard. I hear that all the time. It's too hard. My patients are never going to change. It's too hard. Some may, some may not.
It's hard because, and I've talked about this on previous shows with other people, it's hard because patients have in their mind that diet and lifestyle is an equivalency to taking a drug. And so if they're on equal footing, which one is the path of least resistance? Of course, it's popping the pill. But you and I both know the pill does not do near the profundity that diet and lifestyle changes make. And trying to get this message out of people's heads, that drug I just showed, it's got major side effects. I took Lipitor and Crestor before I found low carb, and I had major joint pain. I was in a lot of pain. And a lot of people that do it's old age, I'm getting creaky, joints. I was in my 20s when I took that drug. I ain't supposed to have creaky joints yet. So, yeah. So it's just, it's amazing the narrative that patients will tell themselves just to keep on doing the habits that got them disease to begin with.
Exactly. And this another thing about the statins is okay, they increase insulin resistance and they lead people more to diabetes. And if it's the inflammation that's actually causing the product of, heart disease and plaque, why do we want to do something that's going to eventually cause more inflammation because they're going to develop the diabetes or become more insulin resistant? It's like,
Well, and depletes the body of a very key heart health element, the CoQ10 depletion, which makes you at a 12% greater risk of heart disease taking a statin drug. Wait a minute, I thought that was supposed to be the answer to heart disease. So again, I've tried at a patient level to be that empowered patient. Say, hey, look, patient, not going to get this from a doctor unless you go see Amanda Decker in Tennessee. You're just not going to hear this kind of information. It's why I've stuck around so long in this community, is the obliviousness to all of this. I'm just shocked. I've been at this for so long. I'm still shocked that people still hear cholesterol. They still worry about their weight, which I put a lot of focus in your practice on, hey, get healthy. And then, it's going to take time to heal the body and lose weight. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so, patients come to me for different reasons. Recently, I actually made the decision I'm not accepting more primary care patients. I'm focusing mainly on weight management. Still taking care of my primary care people, but I'm just growing the weight loss side of it.
Right.
But they come to me for one of two reasons. They come because they want to lose weight and look good in whatever, a wedding, a bathing suit, or whatnot, or they want to feel better, move more, be with their grandkids. Both populations. I love the one that wants to just feel better, move better, because they're not the people that are like saying, I've got to lose down to a size 0. They're like, I just want to move and not hurt and feel and live longer. The other side, it's like, you want to lose weight to look good, but is that the most important thing? If you lose 20 pounds, have more energy, and you can live longer in your life, and you have more freedoms, is that not more important than your looks? And especially with my females, that's a hard hurdle to go over. And I've been there. I have been on both sides of this weight loss struggle, and it's not a healthy place to be when all you're focusing on is the pounds of fat loss and how much you need to lose and can I fit in this dress. It has to be more of, I'm doing this for me to feel good and from the inside out, and then the looks come. They do. When you're focusing on health and you're focusing on making yourself better in all realms through your nutrition, the weight loss comes. It may not be exactly what you pictured, but guess what? If you lose 50 pounds, you're probably not going to look the same as the last time you were that weight. Your body changes, and it's okay. That's part of life. And let's focus on, did our visceral fat score go down? Did our sugar go down? Did our insulin go down? Are you able to fit in that airline seat without a belt extender? Are you able to walk through the grocery store without getting that cart, to push you around? Or can you even just put on a bathing suit and feel like you're not the whale walking out there anymore and feel confident? It's a complete picture, but for women, it's very, very hard to not just focus on the vain side of it. And the extent that we will go to get there still blows my mind. The starving yourself and making your bones weaker in the future. And no, we can do this through nutrition. You can feed yourself and make yourself healthier for 20 years down the road and still reach your goals. But it may not be the same goal that you have in your mind. We might have to adjust that a little bit.
Man, there's so much in that. And I know women have this very high expectation level of beauty, be a woman. For guys, it's not as intense, but there is kind of a pull to want to have 6-pack abs and all that stuff. So we got a little bit of it as too, but not near like women who tend to be a little more objectified in that way. And it's sad that our culture does that, but that's just the truth. So I guess you're just going to continue to teach the lifestyle types of things. Is that where you're wanting to move? You wanting to stay in the mainstream of medicine, or do you have bigger dreams someday?
No, I'm still staying in the mainstream of medicine because where I work, it really, they require their insurance to get care that they need. We have a kind of a blue collar area who is a lower income earner, but they have insurance, so they can't cash to come see necessarily. So, like I said, I'm going to continue seeing my primary care patients until I don't have any primary care patients anymore. And a lot of them are my age, so hopefully they're going to see me through to retirement. But growing I call it weight management side of things. It's actually more metabolic health when you get into it. It's way more about metabolic health than it is weight management after that first visit. But they come see me because they want to lose weight, and then it turns into something completely different. but that's what I want to grow. And, I see the patient for that first visit, and then I do a virtual visit with them in 2 weeks, and then I do another follow-up, and I see them monthly, every 4 to 6 weeks, until we feel like we've reached our goal. But our relationship won't end there. I'm going to continue to see them every 3, 6, or 12 months after we've reached our goal, because that maintenance stage is sometimes even harder than the weight loss stage. It's just, my practice has completely changed, and I'm actually happy in what I do now, because I get joy out of helping other people get better. And every day, somebody that is telling me, I was able to throw the football with my kids, or I was able to bend down and tie my shoes for the first time in several years. And that it completely changes the practice and your reason to want to get up and go. Because I was almost sick of medicine at one point, because, like I said, everybody was just getting dying, and now I get to see the other side of it. And so that's why I've decided, all right, primary care side, this is my calling. This is what I need to do.
I have interviewed so many doctors and nurses and everybody over the years, and they say the same thing, Amanda, like low carb and embracing this and then using it themselves, but also with their patients, makes them excited to get up in the morning. Quite frankly, guys, those of you watching this, your doctor's not happy. Your nurse in the traditional setting is not happy. They're going through the motions because that's what they feel like their lot is in life. They signed up to help people, but they haven't done what Amanda and so many brave people have done. You've broken from the mold, and you're still catching fire for that. But what you're doing now is actually leading to real health change in your patients.
Yeah, and I do hope that the insurance side starts to reimburse that and help it better, so that more providers might want to step into this realm. I've figured out a way to make it work for me, as far as, making sure that I'm treating them for their diabetes or their heart disease or their whatever, but I'm actually treating for their weight, their metabolic health, precursors. But I do hope that our healthcare system changes to allow more providers to be able to dive into the nutrition world with their patients.
Well, here's the thing. Your proof of concept that what you're doing has end results. And, you talked about getting dinged because you didn't follow protocol. I don't think we need to see the means by which you got there. Let's look at the outcome. And the outcomes, I'm sure, will speak for themselves cumulatively the longer you do this. So thank you for what you're doing. Again, Amanda Decker, go check her out on Twitter. Decker Less Carbs. Can I ask you, why are you on Twitter? That's like a hellhole for social media. Like Instagram is where all the fun people are.
Well, I'm on Instagram, but my Instagram is more of where I showcase like my kids and my family stuff. It's not anything
professional, yeah.
Yeah, and so I have a colleague friend, Jennifer Williams, who is also a rural NP, doing kind of the same thing I am doing. It's just like, you have to get on Twitter. That's where all the people that we read about and talk about and listen to podcasts, that's where they are, and putting out their studies. I drug my feet for a long time because I'm technologically illiterate, and then I said, all right, fine, I'll get on. And then it just, I don't know, it's slowly getting addictive.
Yeah, I got a good little following. You're building it. The problem is it's such a mishmash of F you, this is the stupidest thing that with, wow, look at this new study I found. So it's like, if you can cut through all the muckety muck and get to the good stuff, there is good stuff there. But I'm not as active on Twitter as I am, say, Instagram. Facebook is getting like Twitter, where it's just crazy. But at least you're out there. So I appreciate it. And that's how we connected. So apparently it worked. Well, Amanda, thank you for being here today. Good work.